Starmer didn't even try, by all accounts, to strike a deal which would enable us to send illegal migrants back to France, those that have come across the channel. Now, you would have thought that might at least have been on the table. You know, I would have, if I were advising Keir Starmer, a prime minister who's very much on the back foot politically in the UK, I would have said, Prime Minister, even if you don't really want this aspect of the deal, really good idea to be seen fighting for it. Even if you lose that fight, to have the ability as part of this wider negotiation, not that I think we should be doing it anyway, to say, actually, we, the UK, want the right to be able to send migrants, illegal migrants, back to France. Didn't even try for it. The trade negotiators, insiders have said it was never even put forward. You know, the politics of that, the stupidity of not even trying to fight for that.
Worst, by our government spending taxpayers' money to try and convince us they've got this under control. What an absolute joke, Isabel, isn't it?
Complete and utter joke. You know, these numbers are completely derisory relative to the scale of the problem. And this is Starmer massively on the back foot. You know, his party is currently literally behind reform in the polls, despite his enormous majority in the House of Commons. He's panicking, and they've rustled up this pathetic stunt. Well, taxpayers are not going to be deceived by this, are they? You know, taxpayers are entitled to be absolutely bloody furious that once again their intelligence is being insulted and their hard-earned cash is being squandered arranging exclusive private jet travel for Albanians who, you know, let's be frank,
have broken the law. Have broken the law.
They've broken the law, and what are they getting? 4 seats each or something on the private jet. What an absolute joke, and what a disgrace this government is.
Couldn't agree more. And you used a great word there, sceptical.
Signing his party's political death warrant at this point. Yeah. You know, he may get a high out of this for the next couple of years, or as long as he survives in Downing Street, which I don't think will be till the next election. No. He may get off on being one of the gang again in Brussels and being part of what he says Britain's back on the European stage and all of that. But the price that the country will pay is very high, and the political price that his party will pay, I think, is incalculable at this point. He's just played right into the hands of reform and even of the Tories, who are just going to now, from now on until polling day, say that you Keir Starmer, have sold out Brexit. Yeah. You've reversed what everybody voted for. We knew you wanted to do it, you plotted it, and now you've done it. Yeah. And I had hope that on the back of these...
When Isabel Oakeshott enters the ring, she doesn't shadowbox. She swings for the jaw. And this time, Keir Starmer was in the crosshairs. What unfolded wasn't your usual political back and forth. It was a verbal battering so sharp it left observers speechless, and Starmer metaphorically soaked, like someone caught without an umbrella in a political monsoon. There was no build-up, no soft landing, just a full-throttle takedown that turned a dry discussion into a headline frenzy. Isabel didn't show up to politely disagree, she showed up to dismantle. It wasn't about policy nuance or ideological sparring, it was about character, and her message was clear. Starmer's biggest flaw isn't incompetence, it's judgment. And in her view, that makes him dangerous in the most boring way possible.
This government is.
Couldn't agree more. And you used a great word there, sceptical. You know, it doesn't wash for me anymore for Starmer and his acolytes to stand up and say, these people don't understand how difficult it is, just sceptical right-wing thugs. No. This is our money that you're spending, and it's window dressing. I would rather that our government would do something about that. I mean, I know you're going to laugh. We laughed privately about this, but I mean, yesterday we literally discover that it's possible, if you're a convicted criminal, to get a left-wing lawyer paid for by you and me and everybody listening to go to a court in front of a left-wing judge and say, I can't go back to Albania or wherever I came from. I know I've broken the law, but my son, he doesn't like the chicken nuggets in Albania. And people think I'm taking that he doesn't like the chicken. Today we discover a Pakistani paedophile escaped deportation because he successfully, through his left-wing lawyer, convinced the judge that it would harm psychologically his children. I don't mean to be rude. You're a mother, I'm a father. Forget the children he harmed and abused and raped. Forget them.
She didn't accuse, she insinuated. Hard. Her message hinted at secrets, shadows, and political debts that could make headlines for months, possibly linked to figures around him. Nothing confirmed, but enough was said to leave viewers leaning in, asking the same question. What exactly is he hiding? Starmer's political brand was supposed to be steady, responsible, grown-up. Instead, it's become a punchline. He came into politics like a man on a mission to win hearts with PowerPoints, armed with tea, tax codes, and the kind of charisma you'd expect at an insurance seminar. Isabel pounced on this disconnect. While Starmer drones on with numbers and neutrality, she came in with a wrecking ball, swinging with satire, sarcasm, and the kind of sharp delivery that made even seasoned commentators sit up. While he shuffled through his notes, she shredded the entire premise of his persona, and the contrast couldn't have been more brutal. Starmer thinks shedding a jacket mid-speech adds flair. Isabel saw it as a desperate attempt at reinvention, less reformer, more weathered lecturer trying to look down with the kids. Even when protesters tried to spice things up with glitter, Starmer somehow managed to make that moment feel like watching beige paint dry.
Manifesto pledges that was all, as we were told, fully costed, everything's absolutely fine. Oh no, hold on, there's a massive black hole here. Well, is there? Because the Office of Budgetary Responsibility doesn't really agree with us. His blueprint for the next 5 years, number 10 denies it's a reset. We've got 6 milestones, 5 missions, 3 foundations, 7 pillars for growth. Are you as confused as I am?
Can I just add one figure? 0 chance of turning this around. 0. Because there was a glaring omission in all of that, which is immigration.
Yeah.
It's like number one thing that exercises Labour voters and many others besides.
And indeed Reform UK voters who are doing better than Labour in the polls at the moment.
How could he have left that off? You know, it is so astonishingly stupid that you begin to think, is there something else at work here? Is someone actually plotting to make this party, this leadership, this particular Prime Minister fail? How can they have left that off? Because talk to anybody, and I know probably I'm in a bit of an echo chamber. A lot of people that I talk to are very, very passionate about what's happening to our country as a result of the loss of control of our borders. But I think that many Labour voters and many who, you know, aren't sure who to vote feel really strongly about this. So why isn't it at the heart of his agenda? I find that utterly bewildering. And you know what? Every time that he makes a basic mistake like this, those on the other side, those in the opposition parties, literally a private...
She wasn't just targeting dullness. She was warning of danger, because bland speeches don't deflect real threats. And if someone can stroll up to the leader of the opposition and manhandle him mid-speech, maybe we're already too late to ask who's really in control. Isabel didn't just comment, she carved. From the moment she took the floor, she painted Starmer as the walking definition of uninspiring. To her, his speeches aren't rallying cries. They're bedtime stories without the comfort. Not dull in a forgettable way, but in a way that actually drains energy from the room. She went straight for the tone, the delivery, the dead-eyed stare that feels more suited to a how-to video on boiler maintenance than to national leadership. Starmer doesn't just lack spark, he seems to actively repel it. And Isabel made sure you felt every second of that. What makes it sting is the timing. Britain's in flux. People are desperate for vision, for boldness, for someone who actually wants to lead. But instead, they get a man who seems more comfortable hiding behind policy PDFs than actually standing for something. Isabel's critique wasn't just that he's boring. It's that his dullness is dangerous.
Would find the Caribbean too hot. We're a laughingstock, Isabel. Seriously, we're in danger of becoming a bloody laughingstock. We really are.
But it's the voters that are crying over this, because we're the ones that have to face the consequences of having all these people in the country, in our country, who should not be here. And they're using it as some kind of hotel, despite the fact that many of these people that we're talking about here in these court cases actually have serious criminal records. Yes. And there is a reason that they're being deported. And I tell you, Serious countries around the world do not do this to themselves. If somebody breaks the law, they get deported. It is as simple as that. They don't have the option to go bleed.
Because when leadership is this flat, it creates a vacuum. And history shows us that vacuums don't stay empty. They get filled. Often by things far worse than glitter. Isabel didn't hold back. When immigration came up, she tore into Starmer, not just for policy, but for lacking conviction. She argued that under his watch, Britain's borders risked becoming symbolic, with weak enforcement and empty gestures. To her, this wasn't just incompetence, it was political self-sabotage. Then she dug deeper. Brexit, gender identity, leadership style. Starmer's record in her eyes is a mess of contradictions. One day he's a progressive, the next he's dodging clarity. Isabel framed it as more than inconsistency, it's a lack of backbone. Voters aren't just confused, they're tired. She mocked his attempts to seem relatable, calling it all theatre. Pints, pub visits, awkward smiles. It wasn't authenticity, she said, it was performance. Even the £30,000 sterling 0 pence office furniture bill became a metaphor for waste and cluelessness. To her, Starmer isn't leading, he's reacting. Carefully packaged, overly managed, and afraid to offend. He comes off more like a generic brand than a bold leader. And his team? Robotic and forgettable. Except Rayner, though even her fire, Isabel argued, is treated as a threat, not a strength. Next, Isabel set her sights on one of Starmer's proudest talking points, his so-called mission-led approach to government. But rather than applaud the strategy, she dismantled it as little more than branding in disguise. To her, these missions aren't plans, they're slogans, buzzwords dressed up as policy, slideshows pretending to be leadership. In her view, the entire concept feels like something brewed in a marketing lab, not in the heart of public service. She argued that Starmer's grand vision amounts to nothing more than corporate jargon. Ambitions to grow the economy and restore trust sound great in theory, but when you scratch beneath the surface, there's no substance, no fire, no specifics, no soul. And when your biggest selling point is sounding like a management consultant at a local council meeting, it's not just uninspiring, it's damning. Isabel framed it as a government by committee, guided not by bold leadership, but by whatever phrase fits best on an infographic. To her, it's not just boring. It's symptomatic of a wider failure to connect, inspire, or even lead. Isabel then drilled into what she saw as Starmer's most defining trait: avoidance. Not of conflict, but of commitment. Every time a serious issue arises, he dances around it with phrases so bland they practically dissolve on contact. To Isabel, his answers are less about offering direction and more about dodging accountability. Instead of standing firm, he reaches for empty phrases like tough decisions or the right balance. And while those may sound professional, they ultimately say nothing. And that's the problem. She accused him of mastering the art of political evasion, the man who has turned indecision into a performance. Once so practiced, it now resembles leadership to the untrained eye. But peel back the curtain, and what's underneath is little more than carefully worded vagueness. Even when he finally speaks, Isabel argued, it feels like a meeting that should have been an email, a long-winded detour around anything meaningful, where clarity is avoided like a live wire. In her view, Britain doesn't need a leader who tiptoes through policy like it's a minefield. It needs someone who can actually take a stance and survive the blast. Isabel saved some of her sharpest blows for the end, and they weren't about scandals or headlines. They were about Starmer himself. His public image, carefully built to be inoffensive, has become the very thing that makes him disappear. Every move, every line, every press event feels like it's been passed through 5 filters, ending in the safest, dullest version possible. Take Beergate, for example. It was supposed to be his moment of rebellion, his defiance under pressure. But, as Isabel pointed out, his version of rule-breaking is so sanitized, it barely qualifies as noteworthy. Instead of scandal, we got the political equivalent of a librarian staying out past curfew. And that's the bigger issue. Starmer doesn't just avoid controversy, he avoids colour, energy, risk. He operates like a smartphone on airplane mode, technically functional but totally disconnected. Even when he tries to relate to voters, it feels robotic. Holding a pint, walking past a Greggs, delivering speeches in his shirt sleeves. None of it lands, because none of it feels real. Isabel didn't expose him with secret files. She didn't need to. She simply held up a mirror, and what stared back was a man so committed to caution, so surgically stripped of edge or passion, that he's become the physical embodiment of political beige. No grand scandal, no villain arc, just a quiet, persistent failure to inspire. And in today's Britain, Isabel argued, that might be the most dangerous trait of all. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this.